I'd like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri Wurrung people as the traditional owners of the land where this recording was made. Over the past few months, I've been walking through reserves around Melbourne, Naarm, and recording conversations along the way. I've met with traditional owners and First Nations peoples, conservationists, ecologists, and others who've chosen a place that matters to them. We walk and talk about nature, what lives there, what's changed, and what needs protecting. You'll hear our footsteps, the wind in the trees, the birds overhead, and the city not too far away. This is Finding Melbourne's Nature. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by the amazing urban ecologist, Dr Kylie Soanes. We're standing on the banks of the Birrarung, hearing all about the Floating Wetlands project that's bringing more biodiversity into our city. We're also going to be hearing about Kylie's journey into conservation and how we can all bring a bit more nature into our lives, no matter where you live.
My name is Dr Kylie Soanes. I'm a researcher in urban ecology at the University of Melbourne, and we are currently in Melbourne CBD at the Docklands, taking a stroll past the floating wetlands.
That's so cool. And you've had a big role in these floating wetlands.
Yes, I was really lucky to be part of this project. So the City of Melbourne, the local council, had this huge ambition. They wanted to add green to a really grey space in the river, and they wanted a little bit of help and advice to do it. They wanted to know how they could do it in a way that was not just green but provided good wildlife habitat, and we worked together to sort of come up with some design principles, some target species, and then they managed to bring the whole thing to life, which has been honestly one of the most rewarding projects that I've been lucky enough to be part of, because you go from an idea and having these ecological principles and the scientific understanding of species habitat, and then to actually see that put into a drawing and then come to life as a real piece of habitat is just a wonderful feeling. So
I asked Kylie how the concept of floating wetlands came about.
So floating wetlands have been used a lot in things like stormwater, retention ponds, all over the world. They're a great way of using vegetation to help clean up water, basically. And we notice that animals like to cluster around them. And so the idea was, well, can we do that on purpose in places where it's not just an accident that you get a whole bunch of ibis turning up on floating wetlands that are supposed to be cleaning water, but can you use this to add greenery back into a space that is really, really grey and basically impenetrable? So you get city rivers like this. We're about 3 metres above the water surface now, and it's just a vertical drop. You know, there's no riparian access for animals to get into the water, out of the water. There's absolutely nowhere that you could plant any kind of revegetation. You could pull out some of the weeds that are sprouting from the concrete, but that's about it. So a lot of our traditional approaches to restoration kind of go out the window here, and typically we'd write it off as a space where we can't do anything. So how do you create brand new space? And that's where floating wetlands kind of come into it.
And to give a visual context, we're sort of between Library at the Dock and Marvel Stadium.
We're on a concrete promenade. There are high-rise apartment buildings around us, and just like dozens and dozens of yachts. You can see Marvel Stadium over the back. To get any kind of meaningful vegetation in here would mean taking some of these buildings down, and I don't think the residents would particularly appreciate that. But the other benefit of that is, you have all of these people living here with very little access to meaningful green space or native biodiversity, and by putting in these floating wetlands, it's created these sort of these platforms basically for nature in city that people have started to notice. They come to see the swans, they come to see all the water birds. There's a bench seat over there that people just sit and picnic. Every time I'm here to try and have a little sticky beak at what the swans are up to, someone will come up and be like, oh, aren't they great? These are our swans, and telling me all about it. And that's something that took me by surprise, is how great the local response would be, how much desire there was just to see that kind of stuff in their own backyard.
And if we squint a bit and imagine, so Westgate Park's probably not too far as the swan flies.
No, not at all.
And do these serve as extensions or stepping stones for that greater habitat, or do they have a connection at all?
Yeah, look, I think that is absolutely a long-term goal, like both to the larger wetland parks around here and then also further up the river.
Yeah.
You know, if you could start stretching this really nice riparian habitat all the way up to sort of just enable animals to filter down and to give them that resource. You know, something that you notice here as a waterway habitat, you know, there's not a lot of emergent vegetation for foraging or for refuge or for nesting. There's not a lot of flat surfaces for basking for things like turtles and ricali, and they're the kinds of resources that we're trying to put back into this landscape. And as you add more and more, you can kind of bring these stepping stones so that we're actually bleeding the edges of those parks and those nice natural reserves and just helping it filter its way all across the urban landscape. And I mean, that's my goal with everything, right, is that we have less delineation between this is a natural reserve area for nature and this is where the people are. It's like, can we just blur that all together so that everybody benefits?
So it's a hopeful story. There's a chance.
There is absolutely a chance. Like, my dream would be to have kingfishers perching on these floating wetlands. That's one of the absolute goals. I even put it in the original scoping document to the City of Melbourne, like the idea of if we add these perches, then birds that like to sit and hunt and prey in shallower waters will have somewhere to do that. Because again, looking around us, there's not really anything branch-like for a little perching bird to get their feet around, and that's why there are some of those on the floating wetlands. These smaller perches for foraging birds, and that would be the dream, is that one day kingfishers are just sitting themselves up on these perches and diving into the water.
It's so good to think that it can coexist with industry next door, housing, you know, there's everything around here.
Yeah, it's such a busy space, and even thinking about where we could put these floating wetlands was a huge eye-opener, because, you know, they asked me for my advice about ecologically what was best, but at the end of the day, so many other things had to come into consideration. There are underwater services and pipes and sewerage outflows and storm drains. There's turning areas for boats that need to be kept safe. There's just so much activity going on under the surface of the water as well. So at the end of the day, just putting them somewhere where they would be safe, not crashing into people and not damaging any of the critical surfaces was part of it.
So do you see other approaches where we could be innovative in the city spaces similar to the floating wetlands? Do you have any ideas coming out of ways that we could utilise existing, maybe green but not native spaces yet? Yeah,
there's heaps of different, really cool examples going on. People are starting to look at, streetscapes. There's some fantastic projects that are looking at how people can better take advantage of nature strips, for example, and even converting nature strips that are essentially concrete back into pollinator gardens, like the Melbourne Pollinator Project over the other side of the river. They're trying to, again, that principle of bleeding the edges of our big parks. How can they put stepping stones throughout the landscape so that we're not just relying on 3 big, beautiful parks in Melbourne to support all of our biodiversity? And there are so many little spaces that are not technically for nature on our maps, but they could be, if we thought about what's the right species in the right spaces, and people really get around it. And that's something that I've been quite excited. It's a change that's happened, I think, in the last 10 or 15 years, where the balance of people being sceptical about nature in cities has sort of shifted to now they're really excited about it. They're starting to demand it, because they're like, well, hang on, that council over there has this really fantastic linear park that they've just put in on what used to be a brownfield site, or they've turned an old golf course into a wetland, or even Westgate Park itself used to be an industrial site. I remember visiting it in the early 90s when I was a kid, because my dad worked at a factory nearby, and it was just like kikuyu grass as far as the eye could see, hardly any trees or shrubs, and now it's like this beautiful destination wetland that people go to see nature. It's just been completely remarkable. So that change, it feels, and I understand it can feel to a lot of people like it's happening too slowly and not enough and too small. But when you stop for a second and look back, it's pretty amazing what we're starting to see shift.
I believe the swans are concurring because they're gracing us with a black swan's gracing us with its presence now. So
aren't they magnificent?
Yeah.
See, that's my next mission, is if we can get the swan up in the Guardian's Bird of the Year poll. I reckon it could
there's
be
a plug on anyone. If you're voting, make sure that we get this black swan up here.
I mean, look at them.
So, when you're talking about this population and people, the scepticism not being there as much, we've got a growing population in Melbourne, perhaps the biggest city, 5-6 million, whatever, in this greater space that we're in now. How important do you think it is to connect people with these projects and things that are occurring, and any ideas of how we can do it?
Yeah, it's super critical for people to be involved, and I think we need to change a little bit the way we talk about engagement and connection with nature as well, because we still tend to fall back on citizen science and volunteering as the ways that we measure engagement. And they're fantastic, and I love people who do them. They're so valuable. Just keep doing it. But there are other ways of people engaging and connecting with nature. I love these positive interruptions, I've heard it called, when an animal does just land in your path and make eye contact and just interrupt your day and break you out of this ruminating mental cycle of what am I going to cook for dinner and when's my next train and what do I need to pack in the school kids' bags. This beautiful way that nature has of just drawing you out of yourself and reminding you where you're at. And that is a perfectly valid and wonderful way to connect with nature that we can't really measure at the moment. And so something that I'm working on more and more in my projects is, if we're going to do something to restore biodiversity in the city, to bring nature back into cities, what are we going to add to that traditional ecological intervention that also invites people to notice and to connect with it? And so for projects like the floating wetlands, it was a little bit by accident that it happened that way. But because of the enormous positive response that we've seen from the people that live all around them, it's now okay, well, what are other ways that we can do that? Where can we put, bird baths and perches in the city? Where can we add these things like the platycam in Hamilton? They have this live stream of a platypus in the river, and thousands of people log on. I mean, the falcon cam, the Collins Street falcons are nesting at the moment. Ridiculous following. People are so invested in this drama that's happening 36 stories above us. And these are really wonderful ways for us to show people that nature is all around them and that they have these opportunities to see and engage. They're really accessible ways. People don't have to know anything about the species. They don't have to have an ecology degree. They don't have to be able to go out and, pull out weeds all day. They just have to enjoy it in their own way. And I think that's a really important thing for us to remember, that if we want people to care about nature, we have to give them something to care about. And that's more and more what's driving the kind of work that I do.
And so much you've become the voice of conservation in Melbourne. I hate to compare to John Farnham there, but the voice does seem like an accurate description. And by doing that, you've brought so many people along for the journey. Has that been a big intention of yours? You've been really successful in being able to engage people who might not have been engaged before.
Yeah, I mean, it started at the very beginning. It was a lot of me going I always notice this weird bird or this weird bug or, the case bag moth that's climbing up the wall. Hey everybody, look at this. I was that sort of annoying friend. I'd be like, did you see that bird over there? And I don't always know what it is at the time, but I've really enjoyed noticing nature in our cities the more that I've learnt about it, and then slowly just pointing it out, I realised how much other people really enjoyed that. I mean, I did a little post last year about leaf curling spiders that had appeared in my garden, and so many people were just so excited to learn what they were, because it's something that they'd kind of seen all the time but just assumed that it was an old leaf floating in a spider web, and then to learn that this is a spider that has specifically curled this leaf to make itself a beautiful home. People really are drawn to that, and then I'll that's one of my favourite comments that I get is like, now that I've seen you explain what that is, I see them everywhere.
Yeah,
like I can't
that's
stop
cool.
noticing it everywhere. And it's, you know, it's like when you buy a new car and then you see that brand of car everywhere.
Yeah.
It's just in your headspace. And I think that's something that's been really important to me for nature in the cities. It's great to be adding more and bringing as much back as possible, but the act of pointing out to people what we already have is really important as well. And that takes away some of that lost cause narrative that we tend to apply to urban environments. So I'm distracted, there's a jellyfish down there
I see the
now.
jellyfish too. And isn't that what's good about talking around nature too? Because you can have this great discussion and then see this stuff around you and you realise it's all part of what we're talking
Here comes
about.
a coot as well.
Oh.
You know, this is a really big hotspot for Ricali, which I have still never seen one in the wild. I talk about them all the time, and I've still yet to have one grace me with its
Let's
presence.
hope today's the day.
Yes. But, you know, we know that they've been on the floating wetlands as well. They were one of the first species to show up. Before the plants had even been planted, we had all the floating pontoons just here. And then we had a big planting day where the people who designed and managed the floating wetlands had all of these, you know, beautiful native species, and we were shoving them in the little gaps so that their root systems would extend down into the waterway. And as we were out there on the floating wetlands, they were just covered in poo and like discarded shells of mussels and other bivalves. And like within 24 hours of being there, the Ricali had been using them as their dissecting table, which was, it just shows you how important that resource was. And we kind of knew with the floating wetlands that it could go one of two ways. You know, we are putting this natural resource in an area that's quite deprived. So either it will take a while for animals to show up and to make use of it because they have to find it and slowly realise that it's there and that it's something that they can use, or it would happen the other way, in that it's such a rare resource that it would immediately become incredibly popular. And that is what we saw with the floating wetlands. We had different species of birds nesting on them in the very first season. We had Ricali on them immediately. Animals were flocking to them. I would love to know about all of the cutie crawlies, all the different invertebrates. There must have been so much activity there that we're missing. And recently the City of Melbourne even put underwater cameras on them because underneath them they're chock full of, you know, algae and biofilms and, you know, all of these different shells and mollusks and other things under there. So figuring out what's going on underneath is going to be a really next exciting part. But again, you know, this idea that you just make a little tweak and nature responds has been really wonderful.
Absolutely. And through this process, I'm interested to know where you started. Where was your journey? Where were your first memories of connecting with nature?
I was a really wildlife obsessed kid. You know, like things like movies like Fern Gully.
Yeah, that was great, wasn't it?
And if you're a 90s kid, the television series Animals of Farthing Wood, which did some very, like, there's some deep trauma.
There's some emotional stuff. I think that might have been my first tear.
But yeah, it's, you know, even in the opening credits to that, it's, you know, these animals living in this beautiful natural space and then someone comes along with concrete and pours it all over. It's this, you know, it's a pretty harrowing tale. But you know, those were my interactions with nature were really superficial and idealistic. You know, I always thought of nature as being out in the wild. That's why I wanted to become an ecologist, so that I could, you know, go to the Amazon and go to the Antarctica and do all this really cool stuff out there. And I got a little bit distracted. I started working at University of Melbourne and fraternising with urban ecologists who were doing really cool things on species in Melbourne. They were hanging out with flying foxes and turtles and native orchids, and I started paying more attention to what was around me and realising that all of the amazing tools that I'd learnt in ecology and conservation could be applied here, and there was certainly a need for it. And then it also reminded me of, you know, I grew up in the northwestern suburbs of Melbourne. There wasn't a lot of nature around. It's changing, but there still isn't. And so this idea that by doing these things for nature in cities, we're not only, you know, reinstating nature's rightful place, but we're giving people opportunities to connect with nature every day instead of just some people connecting with it on holiday, because they could go to the Great Barrier Reef or they can go to the Daintree. Just levelling that playing field a bit, because it does feel like something that everybody should have access to.
And as we look behind us, there's some tall apartment buildings, and somebody living in one of those, would you have any suggestions how they could participate in conserving areas around nature or support the actions that are happening?
Yeah, one of the wonderful things that has happened through this project and other Nature in Cities projects is we see how people respond, but the great thing is when they tell their local council that they loved what happened, because that is really powerful. You know, people, councils in particular, respond to people, and positive stories are really useful because they can show not only did I do something that ticked a box in my strategy, but the people loved it. And that's a really powerful thing to be able to say, because otherwise all the people working in nature conservation in cities are constantly chipping away. They lose more often than they win, so being able to celebrate those wins is really helpful. And then the other things are all just small, right? It's, you know, planting a pot or having some beautiful vegetation trailing from your balcony when you can, looking after the common spaces when you can't, and just enjoying what's there, taking the time to appreciate it. But I think that groundswell of people demanding that their cities do more for them, and it's not just about, you know, roads, rates and rubbish anymore. You know, this idea that our places that we live should actually be a little bit nice maybe as well, and provide some fundamental ecological and health and wellbeing services, I think is growing, and it's been really heartening to see. You know, most councils across Melbourne now have biodiversity plans and forest strategies. This is something that is definitely on the agenda, and any time that I can help people make those visions a reality is really rewarding for me.
And do you have a vision of Melbourne in the future from your own perspective of, I mean, as well as the kingfisher, like are there other things that you're looking for?
I think something that would be really wonderful to see, and it's only small, is just embracing the idea that sometimes our nature gains might be temporary. So there are a lot of spaces that sit vacant or empty, or, you know, in a couple of years it's going to be developed, so we won't do anything there. There's so much potential to embrace the fact that cities are really dynamic and change over time. And it's like, okay, you've knocked that building down, there's a big vacant lot, why don't we do a temporary nature activation here? And if you repeat that over and over and over and over again throughout the city, as you watch it over time, you'd see nature pop up here and pop up there, and on the whole, it could just level out, right? So you're adding something rather than constantly losing, I think, is what I'm trying to get at, because so much of nature conservation so far is about preventing loss. In an urban environment, we already have so little that if we're not maximising every opportunity to add, I think we're gonna be missing out. We're only ever going to be sort of holding on to that last little scrap that's left. So being able to embrace different ways of doing things, even if it's not forever, it can suddenly open up people's minds, I think, to like, oh, well, even if it doesn't last more than 15 years, I could just do something here and it would be nice now. And then you start getting that cultural change, right, in that people are like, well, maybe I'll try something then. It's only small, and maybe I'll try something then. And I think that proliferation of lots of small actions of all different shapes and forms across the landscape is going to be the thing that saves us, not one big sweeping rule or one big sweeping project, but just everybody doing a little bit.
And you're a leader in this space and someone who people look up to. Who were your mentors, or who were you sort of striving towards when you were starting off in this field?
I'm not actually sure. I mean, I had the classics. You know, I loved watching David Attenborough documentaries and all of those, you know, wonderful nature storytellers. But I guess what I found myself, as I learnt more and as I got more and more passionate about urban nature, I found found what I saw lacking a bit, particularly in the public domain. I wasn't satisfied with only being able to see things in really high definition from far away, particularly when that thing was, being ripped apart by a lion or, some horrible dramatic story, which you can't help but watch. And, they're all incredible. Most of the people that inspire me are just part of the local nature community. The people that they're not even academics, they're not researchers, they're not conservation biologists, they're just people that wanted to make a change in their local environment and did. So the Heart Gardening Project is a really great example of that. There's a guy on TikTok who started 3D printing frogs' houses. He saw a frog in his yard and he thought it was in a dangerous spot, so he built it a little 3D printed house. And this idea of people seeing nature struggling around them and then going, I can do something about that. I'm going to take that action. They're the people that inspire me because they just do it, and it's incredible.
Absolutely. Put money in the puppies.
Have they hatched?
Yeah, they had 5. They've lost 1.
Okay.
There.
Do you know whenabouts they?
Yeah, I can tell you the exact day.
So my name's Kylie Soanes. I'm a researcher on the
I know
project.
Exactly. I've been following them every day, taking photos every day.
That's wonderful. Because I saw the pigeons in it and I was really disappointed.
That's the day. So that was the 19th, and it was the day after. Because I'm watching those ones over there too.
Yeah. Yeah, there's one on each of them at the moment.
Yeah, she's still sitting.
Yep. That's amazing.
It's really cool.
I'm so glad that...
19th. I was okay, 19th she had her eggs.
Yep.
And the next time I took photos, so it must have been the 23rd.
Oh.
Because she had 5.
She had 5.
And the next day she's only had 4.
Okay.
So it's it was the 23rd they hatched.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Best, to be honest, I haven't liked a lot of things the council have done, but these are the best things ever. They are so good.
I will pass it on. Thank you so much.
And that's the other one, so I went and checked her out on the 23rd.
Oh, beautiful.
But yeah, I've pretty much documented everything as it's gone because I've been watching.
That would be.
So cute.
Would you mind sharing that? Yep, there we are.
Okay, I'll send them to you.
Thank you so much.
I refusal won't offend, but we were just recording something, and what you said sounded really good. Do you mind if that would to go on?
No, that's fine.
Thank you so
Sorry,
much.
I'm doing a nature podcast.
But what you said sounded great. It kind of fit in with what we're talking about.
No, these are fabulous. People from down here, we're all coming down regularly to see where they are, see if we can see them.
That's really wonderful.
Last I sighted them, the day before yesterday, they were already swimming right across the other side.
Oh my goodness.
Like it was so quick. It was just incredible. Within a week they're out and about but last I saw yesterday they had 4. No, the day before yesterday they were still 4.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, that's good. So they hatched. I was worried that the pigeons had usurped them or something, or the Ricali got the eggs. That's one of the most common questions that we had was like, will the Ricali eat the eggs? I'm like, maybe, but have you ever tried to fight a swan? Like, they're pretty intense.
Well, I guess that's a great example, isn't it? That's exactly what we're talking about.
That's exactly, people that, they would never sign up for a planting day or, they would never call themselves greenies by any stretch of the imagination, and they're coming here just to see cool stuff. And I think that's something that we need to be open to all these different ways that people can enjoy nature. And the hardest thing about that is that you can't measure it, like you can't put it on a spreadsheet to say that we achieved these things. It's just that fundamental, like the joy and the awe and the wonder, like they're so critical to our well-being in a way that we really don't know how to tally yet. But I think they're the things that pull the heartstrings, right? They're the things that people make decisions about, and you can measure things as much as you want and show all of the benefits, but people are going to make a decision with their gut, and that kind of enthusiasm is what gets people over the line.
It's infectious too, isn't it?
It is. Like, to see people come up and be like, all right, so there were this many swans and they went here and yeah. And I mean, again, like that kind of data, she knows exactly when, how many there were, what the survival rate has been, in a way that we can't, because we can't be everywhere. So embracing those different ways of connecting, those different types of knowledge, the different types of expertise. Conservation needs a broader church, not a narrower one, and that's the way we get it.
And following on from that, this idea of how much we need to include social media in the storytelling of science, and not just social media, but any types of media to really promote it.
Yeah, the social media thing for me was a bit of a personal challenge. I had never been one to, you know, people are like, I don't like seeing my face or hearing my voice.
Yeah.
I was definitely one of those people. But I knew that nobody was really talking about it, and that my voice in it was important. I was part of this fantastic program called Superstars of STEM that was encouraging women in science to kind of hold their space and embrace the way that they told stories and to do things that challenged them. And for me, being filmed and on social media was my challenge. But it has led to so many meaningful connections. It's not just about reaching a massive audience, but the richness of the conversation and the community that you build around things. You know, I put a call out recently because I wanted to know where a good spot to see Kylie was, because there was a film crew that wanted to do a documentary about them. And I was inundated with like dozens and dozens of people sending me like this lake in Coburg and this stream, you know, behind my apartment block, all of these, and like with amazing footage that they'd just taken on their phone, and they'd be like, I wasn't sure if it's going to be there, but it was, and here are two Kylie frolicking in this disgusting urban stream. You know, it brings people together in this really amazing way, and people are so eager to share back with you. And it allowed me to learn what other people were interested in, you know, what people want to hear more about, what questions they have about what we're doing, and that really strengthens how you're able to communicate, because even the best communicators, it's so easy to forget where you came from and what's interesting. You know, I forgot that most people didn't know that fairy wrens change colour, for example, or that the males were blue and the females were brown. And so when I dropped that fact as an aside in one of my videos, all the comments like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Like, they're like, I thought that every year all the males just left, but I didn't realise they were all just turning brown and then turning back blue. But they're the things that excite other people, you know, the stuff that got you going in undergrad lectures. And, you know, when you were poring over your wildlife books as a little ecology nerd, those things that excited you are the same things that excite other people. And that's sort of the starting point for communication, I think.
I'm real interested in reintroductions of species
Yeah.
and what role Greater Melbourne can play in that space. I mean, on the sad side of things, we've seen things like southern brown bandicoots and growling grass frogs and things decline in Greater Melbourne.
Yep.
Do you think there's a role in Greater Melbourne for reintroducing these species back to the landscape?
Absolutely. I mean, reintroducing species into cities is, I think, one of the most exciting next phases. We're already seeing a huge push for it with the pukila in Cranbourne Botanic Gardens, platypus in Sydney, Adelaide want to reintroduce platypus to the River Torrens. It's going to be this really important tool that we have for bringing nature back. I know there have already been attempts to reintroduce Keys matchstick grasshopper in Royal Park, even bringing back locally extinct species like sugar gliders. You know, there are all these huge opportunities because often the threats that cause the species to go locally extinct aren't operating anymore. You know, cities mature over time, just without us really trying, but so many people have done so much work to regenerate areas of our cities, to look after our waterways, to clean them up, to plant more trees, that there is much more habitat here now than there was 50 or 100 years ago. So I think there's a lot of really great opportunities, and urban reintroductions are still quite rare. We did a study recently and found that there were only maybe 50 documented worldwide. But again, it's a really valuable tool that I think we could apply really carefully, of course, but It could be so great. I mean, there's this enormous human population that can help care for these species and be engaged with species in a way that we hadn't really previously considered. And I think we underestimate that. And it's easy to look at the risks, but I think we underestimate the potential positives as well.
And so part of this project, I have been visiting all these reserves around Greater Melbourne and speaking to lots of people who've been involved. I'd love your perspective on how important it is to conserve these reserves or create more reserves in the Greater Melbourne system. Any thoughts in a general sense?
Yeah, I mean, our existing green spaces are so important, right? There are so few of them, particularly those that contain any kind of remnant ecological value. And I know that, ecologically, there's lots of reasons that they're important, but culturally, I think, as well, because there are so few places where you can actually connect with the real earth. Like, I don't even know where it would be when we're standing. I think we're actually on reclaimed land in a lot of parts of where we are.
Didn't think about that.
The Yarra didn't even used to flow here, and this would have all been some kind of beautiful marshy wetland. So anything that we can do to protect those values that we can't recreate, I think is really important. Building new ecosystems is a huge step forward, and I think that's what we need to look at more. They're not going to look like the remnant natural ecosystems, and they don't have to be slavishly beholden to a pre-European condition or set of goals, but I think that there are enormous opportunities for more parks and gardens. There's certainly enormous need, and more is better, right?
Yeah.
I have focused more on squeezing green into non-park areas as well. I really like, again, this idea that we can infiltrate what on a map would be non-habitat.
Yeah.
And I think we need more of both, right? We need more parks and gardens and these big green strongholds that support people and nature. But that intervening matrix as well needs to be way less hostile. How can we have this biodiversity-friendly matrix in between? And there are just small changes that we can make that suddenly shift a landscape from being, uninhabitable apart from a few green patches to here are the core spaces, and then here is all this lovely supportive habitat in between as well. And there are so many species that can benefit from that approach and survive really well in residential and urban matrices with us. So,
what are your thoughts around single species management versus broader ecosystem management? Sometimes we have a threatened species that's hanging on in a modified area. Do you think we need to create a balance between how we do that, or do you think we need to focus on single species management when we're trying to look after threatened species?
I think there's kind of a few things to pull apart in there, and throwing it into the urban mix puts a completely different lens on that, right? Ecosystem approaches in urban environments can do us a disservice, because when people see there's not that much of this remnant ecosystem or remnant vegetation class left, then this place has no value. And so often our maps of biodiversity value and prioritisation look at whether or not there's any intact ecosystem left. And by that measure, it's very easy to look at an entire metropolitan area and go, well, there's nothing there worth saving. When you then focus on the individual species, you can start to think about, okay, its ecosystem isn't here anymore, or the habitat that we wrote out in our textbooks isn't here anymore. But what are the resources that we can provide to help this species survive in this new ecosystem that we haven't really wrapped our heads around as ecologists yet? What does it need to eat? What does it need to sleep? What are the ways that we can provide that in artificial terms, in novel terms? Is it using introduced plants? Is it using artificial structures? It doesn't technically, on paper, have an ecosystem here anymore, but it can still be here. That's the tension that I struggle with in the ecosystem versus single species when it comes to an urban environment, because most people would say, we have to stop focusing on single species, we have to look at the system, and that's completely valid. But in an urban environment, it can undermine us a bit because often the ecosystem is gone, and that doesn't mean that we can't have huge benefits for individual species.
And I understand that opportunism is a part of decision making, but how do you go for prioritisation? You've got a wealth of knowledge that stretches all around Greater Melbourne. When you're thinking about creating projects to have the biggest impact, how do you prioritise?
Where we're at now in urban biodiversity conservation is very much driven by opportunism.
Yeah.
So it's where there is people that want to do the thing, have the resources to do the thing is going to happen. And we follow the path of least resistance, and we take that opportunity and we create something great there. Prioritisation-wise, you would start to look at where the greatest potential benefits are for people, or where the greatest potential needs are for nature. And we haven't got to that point yet. And even if we did, it may just be knowledge that is useful to us down the track rather than now. I think we've got a long way to go before we can really start to strategically guide where nature conservation happens, because it's so complex in an urban system, and it depends so much on all of the right land managers, all of the community support, having the tools to actually make the change for that species in that space. Kind of everything has to come together, and I think at the moment that's why we are still seeing this pockets of best practice kind of thing happening. But I think there's no place in Melbourne that can't benefit from this approach. So at the moment my motto is just to go with whoever's doing stuff. So, if you want to do something, I am there with bells on, and we will make it happen. And we just keep doing that and building the groundswell.
And does that mean you end up playing a role in development even too? Because when developers are looking to maximise the biodiversity opportunities out of their builds and so forth?
Yeah, I've been less involved in new developments. Most of my work has been around retrofitting, so putting nature back into already established systems. But I think those urban renewal and development projects have huge potential, and what they're doing now more, which I really like to see, and it's only a change that's happened quite recently, instead of just looking at where they're going to develop things and where they can do the least damage, or what they have to protect and then moving on, they might start with a landscape that has no biodiversity value and then say, okay, what can I do to enhance this? So their responsibility now is not just how do I not make it worse, but what can I do to actively leave this better than I found it? So we're seeing motivation for biodiversity enhancement and nature positive more now, which I think is really good, particularly in urban environments, which can start at biodiversity zero. So being able to encourage people to add things has been really great. Because in the past, what would happen is, they might look at a nature prioritisation map and say, okay, well, the place that I'm going to develop currently has a value of 0, so I don't have to worry about nature. I can just build as normal. Whereas now they're like, oh, there's nothing here, but what was here 20 years ago? What are the things that I could do to actually help make this a positive beacon in the landscape? And they do take that landscape. You're like, well, there's a park over there and there's a park over there. We could be a stepping stone in between. And that, I think, has been a really good change, because, again, otherwise we're just like, preventing loss is great, but then it doesn't leave any room for growth, right? We just sort of stay where we are, and we want more.
And in your work in the university and elsewhere, what encouragement would you give to people who are thinking of getting into that space, of getting into urban conservation? If you're listening to this now and you're thinking, I'd like to get involved, maybe a career, would you have any advice? Yeah,
it's not as simple as it sounds, but it also is. So the basic things that we need in urban environments are the same as any other environments. Species need the resources that they need. They need somewhere to sleep, they need things to drink, they need things to eat. We can make all of those modifications. The complication is when you realise that all of the other functions that space has to serve, the people that live there, the electricity that needs to get from one building to the other, the transport that needs to go through, all the different land managers of one space mean that something that should be simple is suddenly not. And so my advice then is don't stop when somebody tells you, no, that's too complicated, but ask why and then solve that problem. Because the creativity that we need in urban conservation is not around, well, how do we build a new type of habitat? It's around, well, how do we build a new type of habitat that also works in this environment? That, you know, you want to work with land managers and councils and communities to solve the problems that they're having getting nature in. And they're really tricky sometimes. But then again, sometimes the hardest part is just knowing what's stopping people. Because once we know what's stopping them, we can fix that problem. But that's where most of the challenges I've faced and most of the things that kill a really good project are not that it's ecologically impossible, but all of the other, you know, social, management, political reasons. So we have to start getting really good at solving those and listening to land managers. And one really good question I've found is to ask, well, what would it take to have that happen here? Because then they start problem solving with you. And, you know, these are engineers and urban planners, really highly educated, clever problem solvers that are great at helping you solve problems if they feel like it can happen. So, you know, that whole what would it take to make this happen? And suddenly you've got things that you can actually work with and fix instead of just no, which is really hard to argue with. And so that's what I would encourage you to do. Don't be disheartened when you hear like, no, we can't. Ask why, because they'll often say, no, we can't because of this. Solve this. That's the problem that you have to solve. Not how do we get this plant in the ground, but what's the problem to solve there. So.
And how big do you think the role for traditional owners will be in urban conservation moving forward?
Enormous. Hopefully far bigger than it currently is. Urban, I mean, we haven't been traditionally good at engaging traditional owners in conservation generally. That is changing, thankfully, but urban has been particularly slow in that realm. And so it's been really great to see lots more movement in that space, lots more self-determination. We still have a really long way to go, and there are councils that are still sort of unsure how to approach it. There are still crunches on people's time, but I think recognising cities as cultural landscapes is going to be, it's just an enormous positive thing to sort of recognise that it doesn't matter how much concrete you put down. Those cultural connections for country are still there and they're still important, and we need to respect that and make as much space for that as possible.
And can I ask, with your personal connection to nature, are there any species or communities that you find yourself infatuated with?
Typically, birds that are so big that they shouldn't be able to fly. So anytime I see a pelican or a yellow-tailed black cockatoo, I will drop everything to go and see it. You know, the yellow-tailed black cockatoos in particular, I saw a dozen flying past me on the train today, and I realised it's the season in sort of the surf coast of Victoria where the yellow-tailed black cockatoos are coming back into town, so that we don't see them as much over winter, but as it starts to warm up, they start to come back, and then you'll hear that piercing pterodactyl call and run out and try and see where they are, and then inevitably there'll be someone else on the street doing the same thing. And you both have that secret nod of like, yeah, we heard the cockatoos. I don't know what it is about those species, but there's nothing. Anything can be going on in my day, and if I see a flock of pelicans or yellow-tailed black cockatoos in the air, suddenly I'm having a good day again. So yeah.
Magpie geese are one, I reckon. They look awkward and graceful in
Those
equal measure.
big honkers, Cape Barren geese as well. They're just, or even like the black swans that are around us at the moment. Seeing them in flight is absolutely remarkable. Like, it just looks, their necks are so long, and you wonder how on earth you can fly with this big pointy long neck, but they just, it's really incredible. And they're the kind of species that I think, they're the kinds of moments that really hit home. That's what we're trying to sell to people, is not, this many ecosystem services. The cleaner air is great, and the pollination is great, and the storm protection is great, and the cooling is great, but you can't replace that feeling you get when, there's a bird flying along next to you in the car and you make eye contact. It's just, when a wild animal looks at you and sees you and you see it, you can't fix that with any machine. You can't replace that with anything. And I think that's what makes it such a fundamental driver that we need to be better at tapping into.
I love that. I do love that. I love that a lot. As far as places to go, if somebody wants to start getting in touch with this stuff or connecting to it, do you have any first points of call, places to check?
Like to see nature?
Yeah, like your social media and stuff?
Oh, yes. I am always carrying on about some cool thing that I saw on social media, on the classic Instagram and TikTok and places like that. There are so many other environmental creators now as well. It's been this really great way to build a community and see people that are out there enjoying nature. I love that place, and just, it's heartening. What is swimming under there?
That could be our Ricali.
Could be our Ricali. Come up, you bastard. I would just encourage people to check things out on social media. They're local. You'll be surprised how many local friends of groups there are for every park, every creek. I'm surprised there's not yet a Friends of the Floating Wetlands that has self-established,
what a great
but it
idea.
would probably happen any day now.
Join up online, fine.
And I think the wonderful thing about noticing urban nature is that once you kind of put it out there, you'd be surprised how many other people are noticing the same things as you. And that's how, we build that community, we build those connections, and then we can all work together on something and be that little bit more powerful. Like Birds in Backyard, Great Aussie Bird Count's coming up.
Yeah.
And, I'm a fairly seasoned nature noticer, but that idea of sitting still for 20 minutes and watching, that completely opened my eyes to some of the different behaviours of really common urban birds. Like a red wattlebird has so many different calls that I just didn't realise it was one bird making all of those sounds in the gum tree out the front of my house. It's probably why I haven't seen a Ricali yet, is because I very rarely, sitting still.
I'm the same, I'm always moving.
I think there's so much to see and so much to learn. I think my favourite study, I was rereading it recently, was during lockdown, 3 guys in a Brisbane share house counted every species on their property for one whole year. And it was just a standard 3-bedroom house. And they recorded something like 1,100 species.
Wow.
Just on a 3-bedroom house with a normal garden, a couple of Ks from the CBD. And they had 1,100 species in their house, and all of Brisbane in the Atlas of Living Australia recorded something like 2,700 species. And their point was this shows how much we don't know about what's in our urban environments, because we aren't measuring them, and we aren't recording them, and we aren't just reporting the random things that we see. We don't really have even a good baseline of what's here. They said they recorded 3 species that weren't even in the Atlas of Living Australia before. That's incredible. And this idea that we're missing it, and some of it's probably disappearing and could use a bit of help, but we're missing it, we're not writing it down. So I would love to have just a much better national understanding of what lives in cities, why it's important, and how we can help it. And Yeah.
And you mentioned the Atlas of Living Australia. Are you a field guide, iNaturalist, Atlas of Living Australia? Are you a bit of everything?
A bit of everything, yeah, a bit of everything, and then very enthusiastically in short bursts, and then I forget, and then I don't do it. There are some people that have incredible dedication to iNaturalist, and I fall into the trap of only doing it if it's something
I'm
rare.
the same, exactly the same.
If it's something, I saw a kingfisher on the power line out the front of my house, and I pulled over the car immediately to report it, and I'm like, they're not going to believe me. Those kinds of sightings, and I should be everything that I see, because again, it's too easy for a decision maker who's far removed from everything to look at a map and go, well, there's nothing there.
Yeah.
We need to show people that there's stuff here, because again, just that power of noticing and changing the lens that people look at cities through changes what people are willing to do. And I think that's been really powerful. And the floating wetlands is a great example. Again, the species that we are seeing use this structure are species that live in this landscape already. We haven't attracted any magical new species, but people are noticing them in a way that they haven't before, because to see a cormorant basking in the sun on top of a litter trap is one thing, but to see it on this beautiful piece of green infrastructure that was built for it, people are like, wow, there's nature there. So I think we can't underestimate the importance of just helping people see, because for decades, centuries probably even, we've had this narrative that cities are the opposite to nature. It's going to take some work to undo that, but it's work that I'm willing to do.
I'm glad you're around to do it. Could we explain, if you'd never seen a floating wetland, how would you describe it?
Well, someone very unkindly on Instagram called it just a floating junk raft of grass.
Jeepers, that's harsh.
But that is one negative comment out of thousands. So it's basically a floating pontoon, and it has all different types of plants planted in it. So they are plants whose root systems actually often extend down into the water column below. So there'll be wetland plants, marshland plants, water plants, and then there are some deeper sections of soil on it that can support different types of flowering plants and shrubs. And then what we've added to the floating structures are some habitat elements. So around the edge, it has a banister, which is for things like your cormorants and your darters to perch on and dry their wings. It has a smaller perch that's supposed to resemble a branch, so that perching birds can grasp around it. It also has a little pool in the centre of it that's like a sheltered water body, not part of the main giant river. And that's, again, just to give that little bit of refuge from the busyness. And then we have some open basking spaces on it as well. And then it has all these little ramps to make sure that animals can get up from the water onto the structure and back again. And each one of them has different vegetation communities that have been trialled to see which ones are surviving. The Birrarung River here has all different types of salinity and tides and exposure to sun, so it was a really good way for us to trial all different types of plant systems. But yeah, it's basically a floating garden for wildlife. And the really fantastic thing is that trials of these structures have been done in places like Chicago and Baltimore and London, and they've expanded them to be entire, kilometres long
that was going to be my next question.
habitats, right? So these ones are floating a little bit away from the shore as part of our trial, but there's absolutely potential. They have been fixed to existing seawalls that extend, kilometres long and become sort of this extended riparian zone, right? Some of them have walking paths on them and seating as well, so they're quite buoyant, or they can be made to be as buoyant as they need to be. And suddenly you have this whole new area of green space that people can actually access as well. The new one that they've got in Baltimore is actually part of the dragonfly. It's part of the aquarium exhibit and it has like multiple levels and water pumped through and flowing sections and a little waterfall. Like it's really, really incredible. And they're trying to sort of teach people about hydrology, and it's a really great educational tool. So they can look however we need. They can be designed to suit any kind of a system and support different plants. And I think that's what we're going to see in future, is lots of different styles. You know, there might be some that are just for wildlife habitat and some that are more for people to walk along, and they can have different kinds of gardens and different kinds of flowering plants, but that diversity of different ecosystems is something that's, I think, really amazing about urban environments, is that we have so many different plants and animals coming together. It's a lot of opportunity.
So it's another corridor forming connection thing too, because in future you could be
absolutely
island hoppers.
Yeah, island hopping, and to make it easier for, like, we've made rivers in cities very difficult to traverse. We've made them very wide, we've made them very busy, and the water flows often quite strong and really tidal. So, you know, having these little stepping stone points can help species navigate a lot easier.
It's amazing. Well, I'm excited for the future.
Yeah, me too. It's like, it's very easy to be overwhelmed by the monumentality of urban as a concept, but if you just take it one piece at a time, things become a lot more manageable. And then when you look at your one piece compared to someone else's one piece and someone else's one piece, and you realise that there are actually thousands of these actions happening all over the city, it feels a lot less futile and full of hope.
Natural momentum, like you were talking about this floating wetland, and we've had someone walk past and comment on it, and they've got a connection to that wetland already, and I'm sure introducing the idea of more of them would be well founded with all the comments and things you're getting.
Oh, absolutely. And I think the other thing that's been really great about this project, and it was part of the strategy in the first place, was to be really public, both with the story of the trial. Like, the City of Melbourne were really focused on sharing with the community that this is a trial. We've never done this before, but here are the things that we've put in place to learn about what we're doing. You know, they're really, really transparent with that information, trying to bring people along with this idea that we can try something that we've never tried before. Maybe it won't work, but here are all of the, you know, really clear logical steps that we thought about before we did it, and here's what we're going to learn after we did it. And that's a really, really powerful part of the storytelling. But then the other end of that is that other councils see this project and they see how well it's gone, and they go, okay, well, let's do that here. We have an urban waterway, why can't we have a floating wetland? Or their communities go to them and say, why don't we, the amount of people that tag me or tag Brisbane Council, they're like, why don't we have this in our river? I'm like, I'm sorry, Brisbane Council. But there are, so Northern Rivers Council have just done their own trial as well. So we are seeing this build, and I think that kind of leadership and people going, okay, let's follow, let's try that here, let's make it our own, I think is really fantastic. Can't ask for more, really.
No, definitely not. Just a kingfisher.
Just a kingfisher. Oh, so good. Kingfisher or a rakali, but...
Do you think we need to have flagship species or keystone species that we sort of promote to Melbourne?
I think that's really useful. I think there's a lot to be said for people having, like, pride in their local species as well. You know, we love having mascots. We love having things that we connect to. I know the City of Melbourne at the moment is looking at having a floral emblem, like a native floral emblem, to sort of, again, showcase just how awesome Australian native plants are, but how you could have one that kind of represents the cultural identity of a city in a native flower, I think is a really fantastic idea. But I also like letting people get behind, you know, go with their gut and get behind what they want to get behind. You know, I love when there's just a random fan club for cuttlefish or...
There's a few underdogs, isn't there?
Yeah, and you know, the recent Australia's most underrated animal vote was a really great example of that. You know, people just screaming for the velvet worm, I thought was fantastic. But the Kylie, of course, won because they are incredible.
Yes.
But yeah, this idea that cities could embrace native flagship species or native mascots, I think is really important, because people need something tangible to get behind somewhere. If you say, oh, there's this many threatened species in your city, or there's lots of biodiversity, that can feel like a really hard thing to wrap your head around. Biodiversity feels like a metric rather than an important day-to-day feeling. And then you see a seagull fly past and someone's going to correct me and be like, actually it's a silver gull. And I'm like, I know. And people think, well, I don't care that much about the silver gull. But if you sort of show people what biodiversity means in the way that conservation and ecology people understand it, and it's just this, like, the magnificence of all of the diversity and the colour and these intricate behaviours and just weird little quirks, that love of nature is what we're really trying to show people that they can have here in their own backyards and neighbourhoods.
Now I'm picturing on the side of these buildings a big Caledonia or something like that. Something just to bring it, something to bring it home.
Yeah, people love a spider or canoe. Yeah. And it's the season as well. Yeah, everyone's oh, I saw this cool thing, what is it? But yeah, I think there's heaps of potential here.
That was the incredible Dr Kylie Soanes. Keep up to date with all the things she's doing on her social media. There's loads and loads to learn from all the things that she's putting out there. Also, I hope you've enjoyed Finding Melbourne's Nature. If you'd like to find out more about this project, check out findingmelbournesnature.com, or you can check us out on social media. You can find more of these episodes on your favourite streaming apps. And thanks so much for listening.